All right, all you beautiful, hip, cool cats. My name is Kit. This is Americans Learn. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Oh, voice cracking a little bit. Be sure to hit that ring bell notification. That way, all you beautiful, lovely people are made aware when we upload new content upon our YouTube channel. And today, we have ourselves a fun video. Yes, there's fireworks being launched into the sky. It's July 3rd right now. July 4th is going to be crazy in my neighborhood. But we got ourselves a fun video to check out. It's from Kraut. That's right. I tried finding the part 2 of his Japanese series, and apparently he hasn't done it yet. So I found another video of his. Why Saudi Arabia is doomed. All right. Well, okay. We're going to find out why Saudi Arabia is doomed. You know, we read a lot about the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and Dubai, and a tower that doesn't have functioning toilets. But hey, let's check out why Saudi Arabia is doomed. But hey, folks, as always, please be sure to support the original content creator. It's the right thing to do. It's the one thing to do. And I expect all of you hip, cool cats to do it right away today. So do it, guys and gals. So let's enjoy this video in a 3, a 2, and an uno.
This video is sponsored by Ground News. I highly recommend the app or website for anyone who wants to see all sides of the news without browsing through different sites. Ground News is on a mission to make the news more transparent and inspire freedom of thought. I have mostly been following news on European sanctions against Russia recently, and this app gives me all the articles reporting on this to read from. It shows you how and where news sources have different biases in reporting and rates the factuality of the sources reporting on it. That is something that very few provide. It really helps crack through insulating bubbles that the over-reliance on just one news source can create. For example, check out this article on Russian oil no longer being transported through Ukraine. Not only do I get a list of all the sources reporting, I can also identify the political biases of those reporting, based on independent monitoring organizations. What's interesting about this story is that the end of Russian energy imports will impact me as a European personally, and will definitely impact politics here as well. It will therefore be interesting to see how people of different political biases or outlets that might be owned by people with economic ties to Russia will write about the sanctions, and to be aware of those biases. Ground News is supported by their subscribers. Go to ground.news/crowd to try it for free or subscribe for unlimited access.
There's a rhythm and rhyme to history.
1483, the Portuguese explorer Diogo Chao landed at the mouth of the Congo River and claimed the lands around it for Portugal. He then sailed up the River Congo and realized there was a problem with his claim. These lands were already inhabited by a people living within a structured and well-functioning state, a kingdom with a capital called Mbanza that already had a population of 60,000 and was therefore just as large as Lisbon. This was the first contact between Europeans and the Kingdom of Bakongo, or the Congo Kingdom. Diogo sent 4 of his crew to be ambassadors to the King of the Congo and took 4 Congolese with him back to Portugal to serve as the Congo King's ambassadors to the King of Portugal. A year later, and 590 miles to the north of the Congo estuary, another Portuguese, Alvaro Camina, built a Portuguese settlement on the island of São Tomé, just off the coast of the Gold Coast. São Tomé had no native peoples. The first use of the island was as a sort of prison colony for people expelled from Portugal for being deemed as undesirable, like Portuguese Jews. Being a volcanic island...
Okay, well, hey, great. How horrible.
The soils were fertile and conducive for the growth and harvesting of cash crops, primarily sugar. And it is here where the history of the Congo and the history of Portugal cross paths to change the world with 2 innovations. The Portuguese invented the plantation on São Tomé, vast networks of cash crops run by a central processing structure to maximize output through the use of monocultures and the abuse of forced labor. But there was a problem. The first forced laborers were expelled Jewish children, who died, and at one point Portugal ran out of Jews and others it considered undesirable to be forced onto São Tomé plantations. So they started sailing the coast of West Africa, kidnapping Africans from coastal villages and forcing those to work. And it was there where the Kingdom of Congo contributed its own innovation. It went on war raids deep into Africa, kidnapped men, women and children and sold them to the Portuguese. This is where the transatlantic slave trade was born before it actually became transatlantic. The model of running sugar plantations with African slaves was such an incredibly profitable venture that the Portuguese copied it in their South American colonies, where
Oh, jeez. Well, how brutal. How horrifyingly brutal.
the Spaniards copied them, and eventually everyone copied the Spaniards. The Portuguese may have had to share the slave plantation economy and concept with others, but there's one thing they retained control of: the slave trade. Well, not entirely on their own. The Congolese king converted to Catholic Christianity, but his relationship with the Portuguese was a little strenuous. He refused to abandon polygamy as the Portuguese missionaries demanded, and also refused to change the political structure of the Congo, which was a kingdom in which an aristocracy elected a king from the aristocrats, into a hereditary monarchy that the missionaries wanted. When the king died, one of his sons seized the throne through the help of his mother and the civil war. He converted the kingdom to Catholicism. However, he continued to clash with the Portuguese over the slave trade, which he believed should be entirely controlled by the Congo kingdom, and was angered by Portuguese slave raids in his kingdom. He wanted a slave trade monopoly. 2 kings later, by the 1550s, the Congo kingdom became an absolute hereditary monarchy and formulated a military alliance and economic alliance with the Portuguese. The Congo kings would conduct raids in Africa to capture Africans, transport them to the coast, and sell them to the Portuguese slave traders, while the Portuguese would militarily assist the Congo kingdom in its slave raids, but not go on raids to kidnap Africans themselves. This was the beginning of one of the most lucrative trade agreements in human history. For almost 2 more centuries, the Portuguese and Congo kings would continue to hold almost a complete monopoly on the transatlantic slave trade. The Spanish
Now, mind you, again, I think we're kind of halfway through here. But 5 minutes in, we're not talking about Saudi Arabia.
The Dutch, the French, and the British may all run slave plantations, but it was the Portuguese who shipped the slaves and from who you had to buy. And the Portuguese in turn bought most of their slaves from the Congo kings. The plantation economy of the New World became the foundation upon which the first globalized economy was built, and the fuel burnt to keep it running were African human beings. The wealth the Congo kings amassed through their steel was legendary. They lived in palaces surrounded by ivory, the silver of South America, the gold of Mexico, the silks of China, the craftworks of Arabia, and spices of India. Their ambassadors were guests of honor throughout the many kingdoms of Europe, and you can still see their portraits in national galleries in Portugal to this day. But you can only see their portraits in Portugal, and some in Brazil. So, where are the Congo kings now? The Congo kings were part of the first modern economy, but because of the part they played, they never modernized themselves. The Portuguese introduced the Congo kings to technologies such as navigation, the wheel, the plow, and printing, but the Congo kings never adopted these technologies. There was simply no reason to do so. The entire economy was built around kidnapping and selling Africans into slavery. There was no need to plow fields and conduct investments in agriculture, no need to build ships and sail to places, no reason to build carts that exported goods on land, and no reason to print books. There was, however, an imported European technology which the Congo kings did adopt very quickly and used to its fullest effect: the gun. Equipped with these guns and learning to make them and use them, the slave raids became even more efficient at kidnapping Africans to sell into slavery, but also to violently subdue competition and assert control over the slave economy, thereby increasingly destabilizing the region. The economy became built around the institution of slavery in its entirety. The Congo kings even manipulated markets to increase their output, holding back on selling slaves during the Caribbean harvest season to artificially hike up the prices and then sell more at greater profit. But through the economy being entirely built around slavery, slavery also began to deeply impact society and political structures. The Congo Kingdom was an absolute monarchy with an aristocracy that acted as the governors of the regions. By the 1560s, the monarchy also became hereditary. Nevertheless, the laws of the kingdom had always been whatever the king wanted them to be. Taxation was therefore completely arbitrary. New taxes were enforced whenever the king wanted to take something from someone or for other weird reasons. There was a tax that had to be paid for every time the king's hat fell from his head. This arbitrary nature of governance disincentivized any further investment or innovation in economic sectors outside of slavery. Why invest in plows and build on agriculture when the king can just take away whatever you built on a whim? Those who displeasured the king found themselves dispossessed and sold into slavery with their entire families. Through slavery, an authoritarian state became even more authoritarian, and society became more reclusive. Ironically, as state power centralized within the figure of the king, society decentralized. Aristocrats and peoples moved away from the cities, moved as far away from roads as possible to be as far away as possible from the slave trade as to not fall victims themselves to it, or to its arbitrary and violent nature, or victims to the arbitrarily enacted absolute power of those who controlled it. West Africa deurbanized, fragmented into segments. And while the remaining participants in the global economy that slavery fueled managed to modernize and innovate through the development of other sectors, the Congo Kingdom, the very source of that fuel, stagnated and decayed. When slavery was abolished by the Congo Kingdom's customers, the Congo state collapsed. Various little aristocratic statelets emerged in a continuous violent struggle with each other over what was left. The practice of raiding your neighbors, kidnapping their people, and stealing their wealth continued, only this time within the kingdom itself. Banditry basically became its main source of income. Although the kingdom continued to exist in name up into the 20th century, it was by the 1800s little more than a selection of constantly feuding warlords who, when French colonial officers arrived, had no means to put up a unified resistance against colonization. The last of the Congo kings was made a powerless vassal of the Portuguese, while the rest of his lands were carved up between the French and Belgians. When the Congolese rebelled in 1914, the Portuguese crushed the rebellion and made the lands part of the Angola colony. Amplified by colonial rule, the disarray and decay which slavery wrought upon these lands still ravage it to this day. The Congo is a place unable to centralize, unable to unite, unable to remove foreign dominion and exploitation of its resources and peoples.
Okay, not to be funny, but I see an image that's usually done by Ses Zintech at the bottom there. I know he's talking about something serious, but by the way, why are we talking about the Congo and why Saudi Arabia is doomed?
And compounded by legacies of colonialism, continues to be ravaged by civil wars, exploitation, anarchy, and poverty. Nothing remains of the legendary wealth of the Congo kings. On the 14th of February 1945, the USS Quincy sailed into the Suez Canal. On board was the US President Roosevelt. Dying with only weeks left to live, he had still come personally to conduct a meeting that he believed was essential to the future of the United States and the development of a global economy that could stand up to the Soviets after the Second World War. He met with King Abdulaziz ibn Saud on the ship, and the two men struck a deal. The Saudis would provide access to their oil fields to sell oil to the United States and its European and Asian allies. In exchange, the United States would provide military aid and secure the defense of Saudi Arabia against all its enemies. The hydrocarbons of Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Kuwait, Oman, and Qatar would be the fuel burnt to build the global economy of the 20th century. The kings of Arabia would gain almost fantastical wealth through this trade. They lived in palaces surrounded by all the luxuries of the modern age. But none of them have innovated or created any economic sectors outside of hydrocarbons.
Well, they have made their fair share of crazy construction projects. That kind of has to kind of count somewhere. Not really.
Palaces are built by foreigners, their luxuries are made by foreigners and imported by foreigners. Their enormous wealth is used to bribe the poorer neighbors into submission and thereby stagnate political development throughout the entire region. They control the hydrocarbon market ruthlessly, manipulating prices to ensure their own wealth, but also to crush outside competition. There's nothing being manufactured or any technologies being adopted and further invested upon or innovated upon. The only innovation they were all quick and happy to embrace were the weapons the Americans provided, which they used to bully all those who displeased them into line, and destabilize the region through the arming and financing of various death squads. Their political systems are absolute, authoritarian, archaic and stagnant. And the enormous wealth they gained only made those systems more absolute, authoritarian, archaic and stagnant. The laws they enforce are arbitrary, civil liberties are an alien concept, and whatever wealth you build can be taken from you at any given moment if a king should wish it. Consequently, whatever substantial investments are made by citizens are almost entirely bunkered abroad. Those who displeasure the king are banished, disappear into dungeons, or are outright murdered. Civil society has consequently retreated into private homes under a social contract that guarantees that they will be left alone as long as they do so. A public civil society or public space does consequently not exist. Civil society is therefore fractured and decentralized, with a deep distrust of everyone, while the state remains all-powerful and centralized as long as it continues to run on the money made through hydrocarbons. If they keep running on hydrocarbons, the future of Saudi Arabia and the Arab Gulf states is to be the next Congo.
Well, I think I would have liked a little bit more detail, but it's an interesting story. I never was fully well aware of the history of the Congo or the political and social and economic situations that took place there. However, knowing what's happening in the Middle East, at least, look, with the UAE, I'm pretty sure we've seen our fair share of favorite content creators talk about why the UAE or Dubai is fake, or some of the ridiculous wealth that some of the royal families have in that region. And believe you me, these guys are stupid rich. You know, their cats and dogs will eat better than your great grandchildren or your great 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 grandchildren. Okay, that's how stupidly wealthy a lot of those families are. But it's difficult to predict the future. However, history is an instructor, but there's always a rhythm and rhyme to history. It doesn't repeat, but there's a rhythm and rhyme to how history plays out. So, what can we learn from this? Number one, first of all, it's important for us to understand how everything is complex and how systems do work. But also, I wonder if he did make a part two to this. So, look, folks, if you guys like us checking out more stuff from Kraut, I recently got a message saying that I should check out his series on Mexico. So, if that's something that you guys are interested in, type in the comment section below, and I'll get to it right away. Until then, you lovely, beautiful people, 10 out of 10, life-changing video. Be sure to support the original content creator. It's the right thing to do. It's the one thing to do, you hip, cool cats. And as always, take good care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see all you beautiful, lovely people on the flip side. And maybe someday we'll have a better future where people aren't used as a commodity and we're not living under the rule of dictators, tyrants, and authoritative monsters. How does that sound? I mean, maybe someday, just not today.